Welcome, everyone, to yet another Dive Talk episode, this time episode number 32. If this sounds a little bit different, it's because we're once again recording on the go. We're here in Cave Country, taking a DPV class, Cave DPV class, which will be featuring in a future episode, telling you what we think about it.
I don't want to say too much. We've had some interesting moments already in that class. Excellent instructor. We'll say later who that is. And
amazing instructor.
The students were not excellent at all times. I will just put it that way. That would be Gus and I. But it's interesting because I think one of the things she said, which I totally agree with, is we may learn more from those mistakes we made today than anything else that we'll ever do.
For sure.
Right?
And we'll detail
but let's not
all of that. Yeah,
spoil it because it's pretty interesting.
The purpose of this episode is, and you heard another voice, is Joe. Joe, welcome
hey, everybody.
to the show.
Joe Cocozza here.
Absolutely.
From his own very well-known podcast, which is
Pod Diver Radio, the Scuba Cast.
There you go.
And we're here at
The Pod Diver Lodge in lovely High Springs, Florida.
I love
Ready to
it.
go.
And it's awesome, by the way. This lodge.
You can hear the High Spring accent. I feel like.
You want to hear High Springs accent?
Let me give it a shout out to this lodge because you said lodge and they obviously can't see it. This place is completely set up for scuba divers. We are
pretty awesome.
5 minutes from
divers,
Jenny Springs for cave divers. We're 5 minutes from Jenny Springs. There's a middle area between all the little homes that are set up on this land that is completely set up to lay out your gear, wash your gear, hang your gear, set up your gear. We've got picnic tables. We've got places to hang your hoses out there for those CCR divers, electricity, charging stations,
amazing
rinse bins. I'm sure I'm leaving things out, but it is created by Joe, who said, this is what I want for myself as a technical cave diver. So it's perfect.
You're
because
like, wouldn't it be awesome if there was a place that had all of these things?
And you did it.
For 21 years, I've been driving down I-95 from New York to come cave diving here in Cave Country, North Florida, son. And I said, every time I'm down here, what would I want as a traveling cave diver when I came to some place to set up my gear? I want a clean bed. I want a shower, hot shower, and I want a place for my gear.
That's
so I can set it up. And 5 minutes door to door from Jenny Springs.
And you can back your truck or van or car right up to this middle area with all of these things and just unload and reload. It's fantastic.
Down here in the South, we call that a pole barn, son.
That pole barn. It's perfect.
No, like you had me when you were giving us that little tour and we checked in a few days ago and you were like, and here in this section, you can use all these rocks to practice line drills and stuff. And I'm like, well, this is awesome.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to talk about I had them build, when we started doing landscaping here, a limestone rock garden for practicing line drills. Yeah.
And those are huge rocks. Amazing. We were wondering how you got those in here.
Oh, they had guys with backhoes and stuff putting that stuff in here.
Okay. Yeah, no, but that's legit. But anyway, so welcome, Joe, to the show. But the one thing I wanted to talk about is what it is like diving in cave country.
Well, we were talking a little bit about, I've been doing this since I was a kid. Diving has been always my passion. I was 16 years old when I got certified, but even before that, I was 12 years old on the Jersey Shore, mask fins, a snorkel, and a pole spear shooting fish. And my earliest memories are like watching Jacques Cousteau and Sea Hunt and all that stuff, and just was fascinated. Being a city kid from Newark, New Jersey, going down to the Jersey Shore, that was like it for me. And when I got certified at 16, obviously the thing in New Jersey and New York is shipwrecks, and that's where I started diving. I got cave certified. It was almost like just a bucket list thing back in 2000, 2001 with Terrence Teisel. And I was tech diving, but this was, I was just check the box, do the cave diving thing. It's fun. I just got totally enthralled with the idea of going into underwater caves and seeing wet rocks. It just, for some reason, as a form of diving, it's, and we were talking before about like Brian K. Cook. And, there's something about cave diving and what it, I don't know, it's sort of that challenge that it does to you as a diver.
I
Because
think
everything has to be perfect.
I think it's another level.
Yeah.
So maybe we just had a conversation, you and I, Joe, and Gus was involved in it as well. It's maybe the attraction. It's not going in and just seeing the wet rocks. It's going in and saying, I really had to plan extremely carefully with my gear, with my buddy, with my air planning to make this work. And the fact that we can and we have that skill is a skill that you want to use and stay proficient at, because it's not easy to get that skill. I told you I got certified with Brian Kekuk for 11 days, and it takes a special level of diver. I hesitate to do it, but I'm going to throw it out there. Maybe if there was a black belt of diving, maybe cave divers for technical diving are that. It just takes a different level of skill than it does to be in a non-overhead environment, because you can't come up. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think the attraction, it sounds like you were saying that, is that we've developed this skill. It's very hard to develop this skill. We've invested a lot of money in very technical equipment, so we want to continue to use it, and we want to be proficient in it. And that in itself is an attraction to go into the cave.
I think using the martial arts analogy too, because you could say you could be a black belt in jiu-jitsu or taekwondo or whatever. I took kendo for a while, and in kendo it's Japanese swordsmanship, and there's a certain sense where you and your sword. You actually, even before class, will meditate, sitting at your shinai, looking at it, and there's a whole thing. I think the thing in cave diving, as a form of diving, like any kind of technical diving, whether it's deep, trimix, shipwreck diving, or cave diving, you have to become one with your gear, in a sort of Zen fashion.
True.
And I think of my routine now, living here in cave country and setting up. I'm going cave diving 5 times a week now, and this is
nice. Wow.
Life is great. I have no complaints there.
Wow.
But I'll spend, like an hour and a half. Amanda's like, "Where are you, Joe?" I'm over in my work shed, setting up my gear and just going through it, the process, putting my gear together. I do my dive. I come back. I take my gear apart. I check everything. There's that becoming one with your gear. It's almost as important as the dive itself.
That's a great
So it's like this whole process. The dive doesn't happen when I just descend down the eye at Ginny. The process is starting the night before when I'm analyzing my gas in my tanks. It's all part of the dive or the process.
Yep,
That's right.
And being an engineer by trade and profession, I'm trying to find the words for this. I love the diving, but I also love the gear because it's enabled me to get into a place, and we were talking about this before out in the pole barn, we get to see something that most human beings don't get to see.
Yeah.
Whether it's deep shipwrecks or underwater caves, this is something that for most people is, something they will watch on television, not something they get to do.
Yeah, they'll never do it.
And you were talking earlier about diving with Brian. I was telling you about how about 12 years ago I was down there diving, and he just found that crystal room. And after a week of diving with him, he said, "Joe, I think you got the skills." And he took me to that room. And I think I forget who, I think it was Steve Gerard. It might be Brian if it's somebody else, and correct me later. But you had just discovered that room.
Wow.
So I wasn't like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, but I was sort of like the third person in the world to see that particular part of the cave.
That's a pretty special moment when you saw it.
So, not saying that some special cave diver. Brian obviously is one of the world's greatest cave divers, and has done amazing things. But to be part of that sort of club is just really cool.
Absolutely.
Well put. I agree.
And I agree with your approach to cave diving, because I very much identify with the same thing. When I was learning how to fly, every year I try to learn something new, a new skill to master. And diving was one year that I did that. But in another year, I wanted to learn how to fly planes. And my instructor, Mike, he was great, because he always told me, it's like, how people say that they enjoy flying because it makes them feel free, it makes them feel free and like a bird, and he's so poetic, and I don't feel like that at all. I feel like I'm operating a machine in the sky. That's how I feel. And I felt the same way. And when I'm cave diving, it's the same. Like the gear to me and being able to be proficient at it and operating it that allows me to go 2,000 feet inside a underwater cave, that attracts me the most, that to see, a place that not a whole lot of people see. That's also special. But to me, the gear itself, as an engineer too, is the coolest thing. Out of it.
We're geeks, right?
Right.
But this is what I
guys
was
like
saying.
to play with toys.
This is all part of why we want to go see the wet rocks.
Yes.
That gets back, I'm circling back to the very first comment, because I get asked that a lot. I mean, what's down there? You're looking at some sand and some walls with different minerals, that different formations. How many times can you want to go see the same thing? This comes up as a question, and I'm like, as much as I can. Because it's the entire experience that you, Gus, just described, It's not just the moment that you're underwater in your gear.
Right.
And also, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this. Maybe other cave divers also can relate to it. When you're down there and you're in the cave, you've gotten through the beginning, your lines are in, now you're in your Zen moment, right? Everything's smoothed out, and you're just relaxing and going through the cave. You forget that you're underwater. It starts to become a feeling as if I'm just in a cave, but I'm not relating in my mind to where I'm underwater. If you truly become one with your gear, it starts to feel
like it's part of you.
I'm just swimming. I'm not consciously saying, oh my goodness, I'm underwater.
Yeah.
And I'm
1,200
breathing.
feet inside the earth.
It just goes away. It kind of like, you forget about that. The gear and the oneness with that is enabling us to do that. That's incredible that man has developed gear to allow us to be able to safely go into this underwater environment that you can't come up from and almost forget that you're underwater. It's incredible.
And it's funny how we grow kind of, I don't know if immune is the right word, but we grow accustomed to, like, if you think about it, we were talking about being instructors earlier as well, because you, Joe, are also an instructor, how, new people are excited to learn about diving and all of that. I remember when making it to 100 feet was like, wow, like I'm so deep, I'm at 100 feet. Today we were at 100 feet, 1,800 feet from
inside the cave.
Inside a cave at 100 feet. And it's just so normal and so awesome to be able to do that. So I do agree with you, Woody, when it comes to the whole comment about the black belt of diving, is when you make it to that level, this is all awesome and not so much like it's scary that I'm 100 feet underwater. No, it's great. It's like you get accustomed to it.
But we could get some feedback that, hey, you guys are holding yourself out to be the most elite, best divers in the world. I don't think that's true. I think
I've seen those comments on YouTube, by the way.
It's just that once you do go through a cave class and once you do experience it, it will change you as a diver.
Yes.
Do you? I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect.
I've heard that before.
Yes.
Okay, and it's and obviously we have the internet, so people can check me on this. It's a psychological thing that people who get into something in the beginning of it think they're way more expert at it than they are.
Yeah.
So
and
true.
then when they get to learn a little bit more, they realize how much they don't know.
That is amazingly true.
Yeah.
And the thing about becoming a cave diver is you realize in diving how much you don't know.
Man, is that true?
And the irony of it is like, the person that, they did their Discover Scuba course and they got their like resort certification, go, oh, you guys, you cave divers, da, 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 da. And I'm like,
Right.
You don't realize we know how much we don't know.
Yep.
And that's
Well
the thing
put.
is a lot of newbie divers.
Yeah.
And you see this a lot of Ginny with open water divers. And I have total respect for anybody. I love diving. If it's diving a reef at 20 feet, it's still a better day than being at work.
No doubt,
right?
sure.
I have no problem with that.
True.
But I've seen like people like, and I'm not criticizing, but I've seen like open water instructors at Ginny Springs, like those cave divers think they own the cave. And it's not that. It's just that we know stuff that you don't know, right? And it's actually, when you get to this point, you realize how much more there is to know.
No doubt.
So like the stuff you're doing with your DPV class, well, you're going to talk about that later.
Ooh, humbling.
You're thinking like, oh, it's a scooter.
How hard can
I'm
it
going to
be?
like scooter around the cave,
Right.
press go, and
Yeah.
and then you realize, okay, I want you to do that, and I want you to do a jump line, and I want you to put a cookie on it, and then we're going to have a drill, and he's going to be out of air, or his breather's going to broke. You're going to have to now tow him,
And your main light is broken.
Yes,
And the scooter is broken. It's
and navigate
lot.
through a restriction. Okay,
Very tough.
go.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's not that, and like I said, when my cave instructor turns Teisel, I think I died 9 times in my basic cave training.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely had some deaths.
Yeah, and you
Sure.
were talking about like you and Brian, how he said,
Oh.
no, you didn't do it. You didn't make it. No.
Oh yeah. He's like, you died,
Yeah.
or you killed me.
Or you killed me, which
Or
is even
both of
worse.
us. Yeah.
So it's not about like, and I got to say, with my podcast and writing for dive magazines, the best part of it is being a journeyman tech diver is I got to meet some of the best divers in the world, whether it's Brian or Ed Sorensen or Jill Heinherth or Turi Teisel or some of the greatest scientists like the late Dr. Richard Vann. I got to interview him a bunch of times. Some of these amazing heroes.
And even your community around here, some of these local cave instructors that are teaching it every day are absolutely some of the best divers in
they're
the world.
legends. I mean, you're in North
I'll
Florida cave
call
country.
out Marissa, James. They're unbelievable. They're everyday teaching.
These are
this
living
stuff.
legends. They are actually
They are.
still alive.
Absolutely.
They may not even know they are.
Yeah.
That's what's even cooler.
Yeah. And I've told Woody this. I said, if you play any other sport, like you can't just go and practice tennis with Roger Federer. You can't go play golf with Tiger Woods. You can't take training from LeBron James, but you can come and learn from legends.
You
like
actually do that.
yes, like Woody that got his certification from Brian Cocozza, who's arguably the best diver in the world
Unbelievable.
Overall.
overall.
Okay.
Yeah, best diver in the world. And
give it
we
that.
are very blessed that we have.
you're going to get stuff. You're going to get internet comments.
Look,
about
different
this.
skill.
My instructor,
It's the
my
greatest.
cave instructor said.
And there are so many
Jimmy
greats,
Bob,
greats.
Billy Bob. Yeah.
No, but
he's
there's
the
many
best.
greats, and some people are the best in the world at certain skills within cave diving. So it's
Yes.
we're just been lucky, like you said, Joe, to be around just some unbelievably incredible people. But
You get to learn from amazing people.
what's interesting is we're here really where it all started, didn't it? Wasn't cave diving invented here?
Okay, I'm not the official historian for diving, but
You're the best we can do.
You're the best I can do at this moment. I do actually have a degree in history, but this comes from years of just being in the sport and talking with people. From my understanding, in Florida, cave diving, the technical diving started. We were talking a little bit about this before. Back in the 80s, when I started getting into shipwreck diving in New Jersey, New York, we started doing, we were doing decompression. We started using that voodoo gas of nitrox and sometimes even helium mixtures. Ooh, right?
Yeah.
Billy Deans was doing that kind of same stuff out of Key West for deep shipwrecks in warm water. But then you had North Florida with these cave divers who were scuba divers. Think about this. They were scuba divers. There was no such thing as caves diving, but there were these springs. And what's beyond that next wet rock? So they had to learn caving techniques and create them. These are guys like Sheck Exley and Lamar Hires and those old timers who old timers. Me and Lamar are the
Lamar's
same
still
age.
They're still alive. Yes.
I'm an old timer with them.
So those guys, and started creating the sport of cave diving, while up in the Northeast we were creating the sport of wreck diving. At the same time, you had Martin Farr and his group over in England, and they were dry cavers, and they got to a sump, and they're like, what's on the other side of this water? So they had to develop techniques. So you had Florida cave diving, which became sort of, those guys also went to Mexico and the Riviera Maya and stuff.
Right.
And you had the same time, you had what was going on with those dry cavers in the UK,
Some
and you
divers,
had at the same time up in the Northeast, you had these tech divers, or I think it was Michael Menudo actually coined the term technical diving. But these were all happening concurrently. And I just showed you an article I did for Skin Diver back in 2000 at the NAUI Tech Diving Conference. And that's kind of like when it started all coming together, because one of the things they learned at that conference, and this is 21 years ago, but we're still learning it today, was when the Navy, and this is going back into the 50s, when they were starting to experiment with deeper, they were doing helium diving and things like that. But one of the things was, for example, when did those deaths start happening? It was on gas switches, because they would switch to the wrong gas. The PO2 would be too high. They would tox out or something.
Yeah.
Well, the Navy figured all that stuff out in the 50s. And then commercial diving, in the oil patch down in the Gulf, they were doing deep dives, and in the North Sea. And when did people start dying? On gas switches. Well, they didn't communicate. In their industry, they communicated that. But then technical diving started happening in the 80s, right? So, and this happened to a couple divers we knew up in New Jersey. When did the death happen? When they switched to a high PO2 gas and toxed out and on the gas switch. And this is when the internet was new and people were starting to communicate. And what ended up happening was, wow, that happened to you? So this was a sharing of information. And you had Jersey, Northeast wreck divers, deep wreck divers, and the two different cave diving communities, because you had the DIR folks and the sort of the traditional cave divers, that they were communicating. So at that conference, you had George Irvine and Jared Jablonski with their whole Wakulla project. You had Terry Teisel with the Cambrian Foundation. You had Bill Hamilton, who cut a lot of those commercial dive tables in the 60s and 70s. You had Bruce Wenke from Los Alamos National Laboratories.
Just legends.
You had all these, and that's when this communication started in technical diving. And I think what was great about that is there's goods and bad. The good is we're exchanging information. That's what these podcasts that you do and I do are about. This is just about getting information about our sport to other divers.
That's right.
And we're sharing a perspective. It may not be the only perspective. Get all the perspectives. Get all the information you can. But at the same time, egos come into play, and everyone says, well, my way of diving is the best way of diving. And it's a great way of diving, but you know what? There's other ways to do. There's 5 ways to skin a cat. And this is, I don't want to offend anybody in PETA, but that,
Yeah.
But so I just kind of think the way we're moving forward, and with these communication technologies like podcasting, and it could the scuba board, and if Facebook is used for sharing ideas and pictures. We were just talking about Marissa's photos that she shares on Facebook, which are just amazing.
Insane.
I just think we are moving. That's sort of the history and backstory how we got to today, and like I said, the more I get into it, the more I realize how much I don't know and how much I want to learn. So that's a great thing about our sport.
Yeah, I think that gets back to the very beginning of this conversation. That I think when you really boil down to what is so attractive, that's it. That there's just it's a continual learning process. It's a journey that never ends. It's exploration. It's adventurous. It's technical gear. And I haven't found anything as stimulating overall, mentally, physically, as cave diving.
Okay, so the people that listen to the show, obviously they come from all walks of life and they have all kinds of different experiences. If they would like to experience this, let's start from someone who is not a cave diver, who would like to come to cave country and kind of have like an intro to cave. Obviously not cave diving. You shouldn't go cave diving if you're not trained, but besides I don't know, the ballroom at Ginny, which we can talk about, what else would you recommend someone listening to this in, I don't know, let's say Houston says, I'm just gonna go to cave country and experience this thing.
Let's back up from this, Gus, because we're open water instructors, and I don't want to teach cave diving.
Right.
I love cave diving, but I don't want to teach it
Neither
because
do I.
Yeah.
But I love teaching open water because I love bringing new people into sport. Whether
Same.
those people, and I'm working with some people now who want to get into cave diving. I taught them open water.
Yeah.
And I said, we're doing a dive down in Stewart next weekend. We're going to do some ocean diving. that's great. I'm so excited. They're excited about it. But the same token, become a good diver first.
For sure.
And when I tell you, don't have to get into technical diving. If the only kind of diving you want to do is see beautiful fish on a reef at 35 feet, that's amazing. That's great. I always need, this is my personal kind of person I am, I always need to push my own personal limits.
Yeah.
Right? So the kind of diving that I was doing when I was 16 off of an inlet in 20 feet of water in New Jersey, obviously I'm pushing that constant, that edge
you moved
constantly.
on from that, yeah.
Not that I still love to do that, but personally, I'm that kind of person. You don't have to be that kind of person. You could be a person who just wants to commune with nature, who just wants to go underwater, see pretty fish, and that's cool. If you do want to get into cave diving, obviously be comfortable. Diving has to be the actual physical act of diving, breathing underwater, has to be second nature to you.
Yeah.
You're talking about you're in the cave, you don't even realize you're underwater anymore because we're so accustomed to that environment. But I would say that if you want to come down and just experience like what it's like, there's plenty. I mean, North Florida cave country, we call it cave country, North Florida, from that whole thing from Williston up through Gainesville, up through the Panhandle.
Yeah.
That area is, from a geological perspective, and you talk to somebody like Jerry Murphy over at Cave Country Dive Shop. He's a geologist. He teaches at UF. He'll explain all that to you. But for geological reasons, it's a cave diving mecca. That's why we have people coming from Russia and Korea and Germany to go cave diving here.
Right.
But there are some places for open water divers. There's Blue Grotto, there's Devil's Den, where as an open water diver, they're technically cavern zones, but you can experience what it's like. And I told you that's how I took my 2 new open water students.
Yep.
I took them to Blue Grotto, it's a big cavern.
Yep.
And there's a big rope, and you go, and they said, "This is what cave diving's like." I said, "Yeah, sort of." And they're like, "Oh, we got to do this. This is great. I just love this." So that's a way to experience it. Locally here in North Florida cave country, I think there's also mine diving, the Bon Terre mine, over in, was that Missouri? I haven't been there yet. I met a guy in the Keys who actually ran it, but he always said, "Got to come up someday," and it's on my bucket list.
Yeah,
but,
and they'll guide you through, so you're always going to be with somebody who's very familiar with it.
But there is there's Royal Springs up here. There's a big cavern zone there. That's a great place to also do open water teaching here. There are places here that, besides the Ginny Ballroom, that you can go and do, quote unquote, open water diving in a sort of a cavern zone area.
Yeah, I like the Ginny Ballroom just because you have the constant current.
The flow there.
The flow.
There's no way you can get stuck in there. It'll just spit you out.
Exactly. So the flow at the Ginny, because there's no flow at Blue Grotto or Devil's Den or any of these places, I enjoy the ballroom because of that. I think you get to experience going all the way down to like the grate or whatever and holding on from that and feeling the flow trying to spit you out, really, because that's the kind of flow that we swim against when we're going into a cave.
Oh, yeah. Pull and glide is definitely
correct.
Unless you're using a scooter.
Well, that's right. That's a big tool.
Plot twist. But also in the ballroom at Ginny, there's a section on the left that has like a little restriction. It feels like the lips, like if you're going through the lips.
And technically that's a cave zone because you can't see light from there. Yeah.
So what I want to add to this,
free divers go there. I saw free divers going in through that restriction. I was like, whoa.
But what I want to add, and I think it's very important, is that if you want to experience this, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to experience it on your own.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're enticing you. We're telling you how amazing it is, but it is a tremendous amount of technical dive gear, dive skill training. You can die easily in a cave, easily.
A deceptively easy way to die, yes.
So don't test it. Test it the way Joe said. Go in a recreational friendly cavern, which happens to be Blue Grotto, or absolutely only go with other trained professionals and never attempt this on your own.
I'm actually also going to say, find a certified or trained guide or instructor. We talk about that a lot, and people are like, I learned to dive. We were talking about back in the day, it was like, here's a card, go diving. And just, when you're 16, 17 years old, you think you're immortal anyway, so you're just doing
Right.
crazy stuff anyway, and hopefully you survive. And I think about that learning curve and how hard it took to get to certain points, which I could have got a lot faster if there was training. And I'll bring this back to just like 12 years ago. I started side mounting about 12, 14 years ago. And I remember, maybe not, it might be longer now. I bought my first side mount rig got it from Dive Right. I think it was a first generation Nomad. I went into Ginny, hooked up, and I just hated it. I said, this has got to be the worst way to dive ever.
Yeah.
I tried it a second time, and this is crap. I'm going back to doubles. I spoke to Jill Heinerth. I said, Jill, she goes, you know what? Let's do a course. I did my course. Now, I'm an advanced tri-mix diver, CCR diver, full cave diver. I'm doing another course.
Yeah.
Right.
So I did another course with Jill. 2 days in the cave. I had everything tweaked, tuned. It was well worth the cost of a course. So no matter how much training experience, thousands of dives you got under your belt, it's always good to learn more. And we talked about that.
I have 7,000 dives under my belt, if not more. And I'm training and being humbled right
were
now,
practicing 30
live
minutes
on
ago.
this DPV cave training. Right? I mean,
We were
you're talking
practicing
about
drills and
how
stuff
hard
outside.
can that be? You already are a trained cave diver. Now you're just adding something that pulls you through. Man, you need the training for every tool that you add. So it's interesting. We love diving. That's the theme of this. So any kind of diving that you're doing is great. Our show is called Dive Talk. But I think that when you're here and you're living in the moment among this world here in cave country, it's a magnet. It's extremely addicting. I can tell you this. I never thought, and when Doug Ebersol said to me, look, I know you've said it a number of times, Woody, that look, you always want to be in the gorgeous blue, green ocean, just look at pretty fish and so forth. You may just fall in love with cave diving. I'm like, I don't think I ever will. And just, again, it lures you in. It's the overall experience. And frankly, I think we're craving coming here lately more than open water diving.
For sure.
It's very, very addicting. Really is. It's something very unique about it. And you're going to meet Joe, we met you because of cave diving. If we were not in cave diving, there's no way we meet you. Now look at the history and the knowledge that you've just told us over the past couple of hours, not just on the show. And wow, I mean, it really leads you to some of the most world's famous divers. You've got articles. You're super well known in the cave community.
No,
your podcast is well known.
I'm just a schlock writer of dive articles.
I mean, you're humble, but it's enabled us to meet some pretty special people, Gus.
Absolutely.
And that's all because of cave diving.
Absolutely. And I think, cave diving continues to become more popular and more popular, but we were talking earlier today how I guess when something becomes a little bit mainstream, then starts to lose some of the quality. And we were talking about, for example, cave etiquette and things like that, which could be a whole nother topic for another episode.
Well, I've actually have an episode planned on my podcast about that with Terry Teisel.
Yeah.
Because that is actually, we talk about learning and constantly learning. Sometimes we have to relearn things. We talked about one of the safety rules is exiting cave divers have the right of way.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're seeing that a lot now. Now we're going to start looking. It's not necessarily a negative thing because it is becoming more popular, but just like in anything else, you have to remember the fundamentals.
For
and
sure.
one of the fundamentals is we're all sharing these caves. And I think that's something we should talk about too, that from an environmental perspective, divers have always been these people who have been sort of ambassadors of our aquatic world, right? So we're something greater than ourselves and our hobby. It's like, seeing this cool stuff and like, look how cool we are. We're ambassadors. So when Jacques Cousteau was doing all his stuff and we were seeing like, wow, there's not just this blue water, there's all this life under there, right? And people started caring about it. And like with the Florida aquifer here in cave country, right? This is the fresh water system for millions and millions of people, right? And when we dive into these underwater caves, we're seeing that. So when people just like they're changing their oil and they just dump their oil into the, we see the effects of what that does. And I think from a greater standpoint, we can be ambassadors to not just the rest of the diving community, but non-divers as well, as what we've seen. You know, I don't know, get off my soapbox on that one, but it's just that and that's one of the great things we get to do. It's a privilege to be a cave diver.
And that is a big part of the training is we don't want to damage that very sensitive, special environment.
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard. It's very difficult to dive through these caves so that you don't damage them. That is a very difficult skill, but it's a pretty important environment. So,
yep. Now you live here basically, so and you dive. You said 5 days a week.
At this point, I am. I might have to go back to New York to work on some projects. You know, got to still make money. We're trying to do it with the Pod Diver Lodge, but you know, just more people come and stay. It'll be.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah.
I hope so, but not when we want to come. Right.
Well, we're actually thinking of getting another place up by Peacock. So.
Oh, interesting. But you know, since you're familiar with the area and you dive here a lot, do you have any favorite places or favorite dives that you like to do?
I love Little River, but I got to tell you,
me too.
That's Woody's favorite.
That's
cave.
my favorite cave around here.
But I got to tell you something.
We have so much in common. Every time you say something, I'm like,
Oy
I
vey,
agree,
we're like,
Joe. I agree with you.
You're
I
my
know.
brother from another mother.
Exactly. Even teaching philosophy, so it's really weird. You keep
Okay.
saying stuff. But anyway, go ahead.
But I'm going to tell you, I used to say, like, to my students, like open water students, like, my favorite place, I've dove all around the world. The only continent is not Antarctica, and that's still on my bucket list. But where's your favorite place to dive? Jersey shipwrecks. And this is going to sound funny. My favorite place to cave dive down here is Ginny. I've got a season pass there. So I'm 5 minutes door to door. I can, if I just want to just do like a simple short 45-minute dive, I just throw my gear on, I just go. But since I've been diving, like I'm going to just the past couple of weeks, I've been just exploring Hill 400, right? The double lines, going up to Sherwood Split, but all these little cracks and crevices that normally, I'm going to do the bat circuit, I'm going to swim up to the bats, and I'm going to cut back down to a roller coaster. No, I'm exploring stuff that normally you just swim down the line and just swim past it.
Just keep going.
And now I'm looking at like little rooms and little crevices and stuff that like, oh, what's down this little hole that I've always swam past and never gone into it.
Yeah.
And so that's my favorite thing to do right now is like just explore circuits and stuff I've done at Ginny 100 times, but now I can really, really look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Because normally I'm just following a line and going, you know,
Right.
doing jumps.
Yeah.
And now I'm actually like exploring where I've been before and actually seeing it like for the first time.
Take
That's
a second
pretty
to admire it. I think until recently, and it's funny that both of you like Little River, because until recently, I always told Woody, like, I cannot believe that people's favorite cave is not Peacock. I think Peacock it's awesome because it's shallow. You can be there forever.
No
never
flow.
get deco. Anyway, I love Peacock, right? But I think any cave that allows me to use a DPV is my favorite. Like
Okay.
I feel is at such another level of experience. You can enjoy it so much more when I'm not trying to like pull and try to see where's the next grip. Like I feel like I'm climbing sideways inside, like underwater, like a little river, for example. It sometimes the flow is so ridiculous that you can't glide. You have to pull and pull. So I'm not enjoying 90% of the cave because I'm so focused on inching forward.
I think Little Rivers is for DPV diving is great. That's like, especially the first entrance when you're doing that sort of like corkscrew down.
Screw in. Can't wait to try that. That's so neat.
Yeah,
It's a blast.
I mean, I'm so looking forward to it. So I feel like right now, any cave that allows DPV, which Peacock doesn't, is my favorite. So now, by default, Peacock is my least favorite cave in the world. Just because DPV diving
You can
is
be like the
so
guy
awesome.
in the scooter at Walmart, you know, just beep,
Well-
beep, get away, kids.
I mean, it turned into a little bit of a cave dive show, but I think for those
Yes.
listening that are into scuba diving, man, you could do this forever. The learning never ends. Whatever level you're at, it can go forever and ever and ever. And I don't know. There's not many. I've said this earlier. There's just nothing else that I've done that has that many different levels of learning continuously for the rest of your life. There's always more. Maybe that's the real addiction. Maybe that, bringing this show, kind of winding it down, is the answer to why we are so intrigued right now of, if you want to call it, looking at wet rocks.
Yeah.
That's why.
Absolutely. And you know, to get back also to diving around this area, 365 days a year, there's no, 5-foot waves, small craft advisory, nothing like that. Very commercial, very nice to come. And the water's always the same.
And where should they stay? Let's give it a shout out one more time. Tell them where you are exactly.
I don't think we have to mention where they should stay.
The Pod Diver Lodge.
How do they book it?
They can book it. I know we're on air. Amanda, my wife, does all that stuff, but I know we're on Airbnb. But you can book it directly by going to Pod Diver Lodge. That's LODGE.
Yes.
.com. And, just shoot Amanda an email. You can always shoot me an email at poddiver@gmail.com. But get it to Amanda, and she'll take care of it. And you can rent the house. You can rent rooms. If you're just one diver, we have we call it Little River, which is the single room.
That's right.
We got 3 rooms. One has its own private bathroom. That's Ginny. And then there's Peacock, which is the twin beds. And then there's Little River, which is that little small room in the back there. But if you're just one diver, it's perfect.
It is. It's awesome.
And got cave maps here. Also, talk about physical fitness. I've got the gravity gym out back.
I saw the little gym. Yeah,
we got the dip bars and the pull-up bars and stuff.
We came nowhere near it, but I saw it.
But we're getting our physical fitness in.
For sure.
So, there. And, you can just go to our website, which is poddiver.org, and all that information there as well.
Dude, yesterday was so nice. We made this fire on the fire pit, and we're just sitting there talking because we finished early, like at 2:30 or 3. It was awesome. And we grilled some hot dogs and whatnot. It was awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great environment. Well, Joe,
so good.
It's
Thanks,
nice
guys.
you.
Thanks for coming. I had, I'm glad you're almost finished with your class.
Yes.
Knock on sheet metal here that you'll actually pass tomorrow. Because I'll tell you, Marissa won't just pass you just because you paid for the class.
No chance.
No, it's all performance based.
We have to fix a couple
Absolutely.
of things for sure, or we don't deserve to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode of the Dive Talk podcast. If you have any comments for Joe or Woody or myself, you can go ahead and leave them on the podcast page at divetalkmedia.com, or you can send us an email, info@divetalkmedia.com. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. Safe diving.